connections, mind, body, and spirit. This podcast is dedicated to individuals who are on the quest to uncover their truth, understanding their genetic and spiritual DNA, and learning how to harness this knowledge to achieve optimal health. But this isn't just another health podcast. Our Tribe podcast is here to ignite a spark of hope within you, reminding you of your innate potential for greatness. You are pure love, capable of living life to its fullest expression. Are you ready to embark on a transformational journey to achieve optimal health? In today's episode, we have Sheradyn Dekker, a qualified gut health nutritionist with a master's in nutrition and postgraduate studies in functional diagnostic nutrition. Sheradyn not only has the head knowledge, but also the experience of gut symptoms firsthand, having spent years battling chronic gut pain, bloating, missing her periods, food intolerances, and she's passionate about helping others to get to the root cause of their symptoms. When dieting, supplements, and medications didn't work for her symptoms, Sheradyn went on to study functional diagnostic nutrition and now uses the root cause approach, which incorporates nutrition, herbs, functional testing to heal those struggling with gut symptoms. Her goal is to educate and empower women to listen to their bodies, acknowledge stress, and stop looking for quick fixes and band-aid approaches to their health. Running labs such as comprehensive stool, thyroid, and hormone testing, Sheradyn helps to address underlying imbalances in your body that may appear as unconnected symptoms. Some interesting facts about Sheradyn is when she's not working, she loves mountain bike riding, trail running, and surfing. Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast, Sheradyn.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to put a face to a name in a sense, which is always nice.
Absolutely. So tell us this love for mountain bike riding. When did that start? Is that recent or has it always been?
Well, bit of a funny story. So I grew up surfing and stuff. So I'm from down south WA, and then I moved to Sunshine Coast where I surfed more because it was easier and fun and whatnot. And I've always had a bike, but never took it seriously. Moved to Bali for a couple months and then moved back to Perth. And when I was in Perth, I got bored because there's not a lot of surf and I was working a lot and I couldn't get down south much. So I actually bought a road bike secondhand off someone, and I was like, seems to be so many road cyclists. There's such great paths for like networks around Perth. I'll give it a go. Got absolutely hooked, like just fell in love with road cycling. And I was like, I'm never going to be one of those annoying Lycra people who stop at the stoplights and get in your way. And I was like, never. Anyway, I am proudly now, love my pink Lycra. Anyway, so fell in love with that and then moved down south to Margaret River and was still road cycling. But then what happened as we progressed into winter this year, I was like, this is really dangerous. I'm riding on Caves Road. It's dark, it's cold, it's wet. I'm like, I don't feel safe. Like in summer, you could ride at 5 or 6 a.m. because it's so light and you can get out and do stuff. But then in winter, the sun's not rising till 7:30. Then all the tradies are on the road and I just didn't have the same confidence. So I was like, I've got to get into mountain bike riding. Anyway, went over to Tasmania, visited my best friend for a bit, and they go to Derby a lot, which is just like world-class mountain bike riding trails. Borrowed her bike, just spent like a full day, 6 hours on the mountain and was hooked, absolutely cooked myself, almost had some big steps, but it was just incredible, fell in love with it, and then come over to Queensland to house sit for 2 months, and I've bought a brand new mountain bike and got it sent here and been riding the trails in Noosa, so it's just been super fun, and I just want to race and do enduro and do big jumps now. I'm like hooked.
I love that. You're going to be like the next mountain bike rider.
Yes.
We'll see you representing Australia.
Yeah, stuff nutrition. I want to do the fun stuff.
Hey, it's part of it, right?
Yeah, the getting out there.
I love that. And I love that it's outdoors in nature and you get the rush. I love that.
Well, the thing is as well, people forget that we need so much exposure to nature to increase the diversity of your microbiome, right? Like we live in such sterile worlds and so many people live in cities or apartments and things where there's actually not a lot of exposure to dirt. We're not eating food straight off the trees or out the garden, which have a range of microbes, which actually aren't bad, that actually build a strong, healthy immune system. And like, I don't know how old you are, but I'm like 30s, and I think about my growing up, right, was like so much outdoors, so much less technology. But then I look at kids nowadays, and it's not parents' fault per se, it's the nature of the world, but we are so much more, especially since COVID, so hygienic and so sterile and so which has its pros, but it also has its cons. And our microbiomes are showing that. And we're getting a rise of ADHD and mental health things and autoimmunity because our microbiome's so compromised. So it's like we're not getting out enough and we're not having that same exposure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. And I love that, when you're out on the bike in the mountain, you might get some mud in your mouth, and that's fine.
Yes.
It's helpful for your gut. And you're like, yes, please.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a different range of stuff. And we know like the benefits of nature, and we know the benefits of exercise and the microbiome. Like we know it. We just need to get out there more.
Yeah, no, amazing. So Sheradyn, when I introduced you to the podcast, we spoke a little bit about you not only knowing, the paper stuff, the research, the studies, and you've studied a lot, but you also have had experience. So what's your story? Like, what got you to help individuals out there today?
Well, it tracks back so probably close to 10 years now. I feel like I'm on my 10th year anniversary from when it all started, which is actually quite exciting because I think of like where I was 10 years ago, and I was thinking about that this morning going, I'm not the same person I was. So when I was 18, I went to Bali because I lived in WA, so Bali's only a couple hours away. That was our surfing holiday. Had been a few times, gotten like a little bit of Bali Belly, but then when I was 18, I got really sick, like a real bad week of Bali Belly, came home. It seemed to clear, like just like chronic pain, bloating, loose stools seemed to clear, but a week later I actually got Epstein-Barr virus, so glandular fever, and I didn't realise at the time that the parasites and things I'd picked up in Bali had impacted my immune system. Then I'd gotten this virus, which then has a greater compounding effect on your immune system, and everything kind of triggered from there. So I not only had glandular fever, but then that lasted a couple of weeks, but then I became celiac. So I could no longer handle gluten, and I lost my periods, and I didn't have them for 7 years after that trip. So from 18 to my mid-20s,
Wow.
I had no periods. And then it also took me, like probably the last year has been most solid with like every 25, 26 days I've had a cycle. Prior to that, it was still like classic PCOS, kind of like could be 30, could be 60 days, and it was quite irregular. And then prior to that I didn't really have them at all. So there was this whole stress component, there was this immune component, there was then the hormone component, missing periods. I developed psoriasis, I had severe acne, obviously the low sort of adrenal output function, and then came neutropenic. So they did bone marrow biopsies, and they were looking whether I had leukemia because I just don't carry any white blood cells like traveling around my body. So they're kind of going, were you producing them? Where are they going? So there was this whole compounding effect of stuff. I was early 20s. I was, studying sports science. I was doing CrossFit. I was completely exhausted. I was top of my class at uni, a lot of family stress. So there was just a whole layer on top of a layer on top of a layer, severe constipation, severe bloating, severe stomach pain, all because of this one Bali trip, essentially.
Yeah, wow. A way to advertise a holiday in Bali, right?
Well, and a layer on top of that. Do you know how many clients I get that get so sick over there? And I went back, October last year for 2 months to live. And I, touch wood, probably will never go back again because I got so sick that time again. And since I lost my period that trip, and I'd had regular periods for a year just because I got so unwell. My acne's come back quite bad from that trip still because I came home so depleted in zinc and iron and Bs and just the food quality. But then I was there lecturing for a company, and there was like 20 of us girls, and we all got wiped out with this Bali Belly after a night out, and it's awful.
Yeah, wow. I know a few individuals there now, and I'm like, cool, here's a little pack to take with you.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that later. And then good luck. Don't do this. But have this pack, you can't especially if you've never been there before, or if you haven't been exposed to environment. Going back to what you said earlier, like we're living in an apartment, we're living in such a clean, sterile environment. So we're not saying it's Bali's fault, and we're not saying it's our fault, but it's kind of a combination combination of both, isn't it? Us being so sterile and then going somewhere that's not so sterile. It's kind of like we need the medium.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what people don't realise is they kind of think that Bali Belly can be this one isolated thing, which it might be, and you have like really severe diarrhea or something for a weekend or a week, or maybe you get the cold, but then what is happening long term is most people with SIBO, so small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or IBS as we like to call it, irritable bowel syndrome, most people with that have had an episode of food poisoning, and these bacteria have stuck around in their small or in their large intestine and it's causing long-term issues. So if you then run a microbiome stool testing, which is what I eventually got to running on myself, probably, I don't know, like 6-7 years after I'd gotten sick, and I actually found out that there's root causes for what's going on. But a lot of those bacteria are still there, and they're so inflammatory that they're causing a lot of these autoimmune conditions. So I guess we just don't understand the flow-on effect from what seems like a simple Bali Belly episode.
Bali Belly or even food poisoning, no matter where, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Can affect our gut so much, and even down the line, that even like you said, it's been linked to autoimmune diseases. It's been linked to inflammatory diseases, even cancers, some of these, right? The research is out there. It's crazy. We're not here to put fear in you, but we're here to kind of be like, hey, let's check your gut. Maybe after the Bali trip, if you do go to Bali, after it, go see a nutritionist, go see a functional naturopath, a functional doctor, or anyone, that knows their stuff around this, and get it checked out, right?
Yeah. And the biggest thing there, like the biggest thing for people to understand is that the stool test your GP will run, and this is the same with the blood testing your GP will run, is not enough. So many people, I went to my GP and my results came back normal, but I'm still bloated and exhausted and constipated. And that was the tipping point for my sort of health journey, that I spent years chasing medical specialists and blood tests and things. And it wasn't until I finished my master's, I started functional diagnostic nutrition, and I learned about stool and SIBO and Dutch comprehensive hormone testing, that I actually got some answers and I felt validated. Like, I'm chatting to women who are crying to me when their results come in, not because they're so bad, but because there is something. So they're like, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm actually no longer alone in this. Like, there's a reason for what I'm feeling, and it's not just in my head. And I'm like, no, you've got candida, you've got SIBO, you've got parasites, you've got low good gut flora. I'm like, you're not crazy. It's actually, it's there.
And then like someone like you, Sheradyn, will get excited and be like, oh my gosh, yes, you've got parasites, you've got this gut bug. This is exciting, isn't it?
Let me try it.
Little bugs.
Yes, let me at it. It's great. Like, and it gives us, I guess it gives us answers. Like, and that was the thing for me. It came down to test, don't guess. And there's a real mixed thought basis towards functional testing because it's so expensive, right? So people are like, well, I just don't have $400-500 to throw at functional stool testing. And I can appreciate that, and I know it's expensive, but honestly, it was the game changer for me. Like, I had done everything and I had tried everything, and the women who are coming to me aren't just eating McDonald's every day and saying, I feel awful. They are eating, quote unquote, well, they're exercising, they're doing the mindset work, they're working on themselves, and they're not getting results. And that's where I went from doing masters in nutrition, being a PT, lecturing in sort of sport and nutrition and things, and going, hey, I'm trying to help people. And I'm not actually really helping them because we're doing the right things and they're not losing weight and they're not feeling better and they're still really fatigued and they've still got acne or psoriasis. And it was like, we need an extra layer. So I'm all for like doing the basic groundwork and not spending a lot of money and doing that stuff 110%. But if you've still got ongoing gut symptoms, like I'm like, I wish the GP or I wish the Medicare system funded this stuff, but the reality is they don't, like, and that's so frustrating. But at the same time, we're also so blessed that these tests are out there, because I would still be in the same spot now if they weren't.
Yeah, 100%. And we're going to touch upon a few of those tests soon. But let's talk about IBS, right? You've said, you know what, you've said, Mihaela, IBS is a BS diagnosis. What's your basis on that, and what are the limitations and shortcomings of the current diagnostics criteria? Are we able to touch upon that a little bit so people are able to understand if they go to their GP and they get diagnosed with IBS, what does that even mean, and what's the diagnosis, and why is it BS?
Yeah, it's so scary. Like, I speak to women every day who come into me going, well, hey Sheridan, I've got IBS. And I'm like, okay, for those who don't know, IBS is irritable bowel syndrome. Okay, so it means it's a collection of symptoms describing something. So this is different to IBD, which is irritable bowel disease, which is something like Crohn's. So it is actually a diagnosable disease, and that's kind of like endometriosis. It's an autoimmune diagnosable disease. You can get the testing, and that's what you've got. A syndrome means it's a collection of symptoms. So your collection of symptoms look like generally either variation between constipation to loose stools, like a conflict between the two, or you're more generally constipated, or you're more generally loose stools, as in like very, very loose bowel movements, and you're having them quite regularly each day, or constipation, which I class as less than one bowel movement a day, like minimum would want one bowel movement a day. On top of that, pain, like stomach pain, bloating, those are kind of your main ones, but are generally with them, I see food reactions, allergies, which usually aren't allergies, it's just poor digestive capacity. And then also things like heartburn and reflux as well, which are very common for IBS. Now, if you go to your doctor and you're saying, I've been really constipated, I feel really bloated, I'm really sluggish, and then you go, and from time to time I've really loose stools, they'll say, you've got IBS, drink more water, exercise, eat more fiber, work on your stress. Like, that's kind of the general diagnostic criteria for it, and they go, off you go, right? Now, you feel like there's not a lot you can do for that. Sometimes they'll tell you to try the low FODMAP diet, which will help short term, but long term, it's restricting a lot of beneficial foods, which are supposed to be feeding your large intestine. So again, it's a short-term approach. It's helpful, but it's short-term. So you feel quite stuck and you feel quite isolated. And beyond going and buying a general probiotic and adding a fiber supplement into your diet, which can actually make it worse because these bacteria are fermenting fibers, you actually don't know what to do. Now, the research shows that most IBS cases actually have SIBO, so small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, especially when it's loose stools. Then we're looking at these hydrogen type of bacteria. If it's constipation, it's more of a methane dominant bacteria, which basically is just the type of gas they produce when they ferment your food. So you eat garlic, the bacteria in your small intestines ferment it, it produces hydrogen gas, you've got hydrogen dominant SIBO. So that's, to keep it really simple, that's sort of what it does. When you remove those food sources, so gluten, dairy, garlic, onions, legumes, a lot of those, you reduce the food for it. The food doesn't get fermented in your small intestines. It's actually the type of fiber, like for example, a carrot's fiber goes through to your large intestine where there should be bacteria, so there should be fermentation, and it's a healthy place for it to get broken down. So that's the issue with IBS, is that we're just diagnosing you as IBS goodbye, whereas the truth is it's like, okay, you've got IBS for whatever, we want to call it, but you've got these symptoms. Now what's the root cause of them? Is it SIBO? Is it low stomach acid? Is it stress? Is it because you're constipated? Is it that there's low good gut flora in your large microbiome? And that's sort of where I really go, now we've got something solid to work with.
Yeah, you've got something to work with, like you said. And individuals will be so confused and just kind of left in the dark if they just got, here's IBS. They get a printout. The printout says, like you said, fiber, stress, exercise, probiotics. And then they go to the chemist. They go, what's the best probiotic I can get? There's like thousands of them, some in the fridge, some stable, and they go, oh, which one's on sale? Oh, I'll just grab that one, makes them feel bloated. That probiotic stays in their cupboard for ages. Then they try fiber. okay, try fiber supplement. That makes them bloated. That stays in the cupboard. So they come to you and they're like, I've tried probiotics, I've tried prebiotics, I've tried fiber, I've tried FODMAPs, and you're like, wow, like, unfortunately, these people are so exhausted. They're mentally exhausted. They're physically, emotionally exhausted because in their head, they're like, I've tried everything. But really, like what you're saying is IBS is a BS diagnosis because it's more than that. There's something deeper down there. And that's what you drill into, right?
Yeah, and that's where my thing is root cause approach. I just dig into people all the time, say we've got to take a root cause approach and we've got to test and not guess. Because the other thing is if you then go, you resonate and you're listening and you're like, wow, Sheradyn, that is me. I Googled SIBO. I've got all the symptoms. You go and buy a herbal antimicrobial to treat it, but you don't even know what type of SIBO you have. So if you're using the wrong herbs, because we use different herbs for different SIBO, you're not going to treat it properly. You're going to do more damage than good, and you're not going to get better. Or if you're lucky, and you do treat it, what you're generally not doing is still treating the root cause of SIBO. So why did you have SIBO in the first place? Is it low stomach acid because your B12 and your zinc is low? Is it poor, digestive capacity of enzymes? Is it that your large intestine is really undergrown? So therefore these bad or opportunistic bacteria continue to grow back. So we've got to step it back again and go, well, okay, but why? And that's my thing. I'm like, ask the next question, and then go from there.
Yeah, and you got to drill into it deep, like you said right now, like the root causes. You even mentioned like zinc and B12, and most people will be like, what's that got to do with me being bloated? And it's like, well, like you said, if you don't have enough B12, enough zinc, you're unable to make the stomach acid. And then what's going to happen is you're going to get the symptoms of IBS. And it may be as simple as putting up your zinc levels, right? Maybe as simple as that if it hasn't caused any more damage. And this is where the root causes are important. Like you said, it may be stress. It may be not making enough stomach acid. It may be you had food poisoning previously. You may have parasites. You may have bugs. So many things, right? And this is where you drill deep into it to find out, and then individuals don't have to kind of guess and waste their money on these supplements and waste their money on their stress, I guess, which makes it worse in a way. Like that stress that they're going through, not knowing what's happening, is making their gut worse. They're not producing what they're supposed to be producing to break down their food, right?
Yeah, 110%. And also it's knowledge about minerals and food density in the diet. I think like good quality salt. It sounds so basic, but so many people are using cheap salt. Like go get a good Celtic sea salt, or go get something that's actually got the minerals in it still, because low salt intake or low minerals is going to impact your adrenal glands, and it's going to impact your stomach acid. And eating organ meats, again, add a little bit of beef liver into your diet, or take a supplement that's going to give you some of that iron and B's and zinc and things into your diet too. Like eat eggs or eat oysters or eat those real nutrient dense foods that are actually going to support your body, because this is where a lot of this dysbiosis comes from, is that our whole body's lacking minerals and vitamins. So we're struggling to produce hormones, and we're struggling to produce lactase, and we're struggling to produce stomach acid. And it's just like this whole cycle of events, really.
Yeah, so you're probably like the individuals that may be listening, like, well, you're the first nutritionist to actually tell me to eat salt.
Yes. Oh, it's
what?
crazy.
What are you doing, Sheradyn?
Yeah, I know. It's just like a low salt diet is actually quite common in a sense, unless you're eating a lot of processed foods, like unless you're eating a lot of potato chips and a lot of salted peanuts and things. But most people are not getting enough quality salt in their diet, which is actually when your adrenal glands start struggling as well. There's this awesome drink that I tell all my clients to drink as soon as they join the root cause program and start working with me, and it's called the Adrenal Cocktail, and it's got orange juice in it. It's got a little bit of coconut cream, because most of them are off dairy, so that's whisked together. It's got a bit of collagen, so it's got a bit of protein in it, helps keep it creamy as well. So it's got the protein, carbs, fats, but it's also got pinch of salt, and what's the other one is tartare, the cream of tartare that you buy just from Woolies or Coles, which is full of potassium. So it's got the sodium and the potassium, the carbs, protein, fats, and it's so nourishing for the adrenal glands. And most people don't realize even the simple stuff like getting enough sodium, potassium in their diet can be a game changer.
100%. I mean, we are electricity, right? Electrolytes.
Yeah.
Like, for anything to function within us, it needs it. It needs salt, it needs potassium, it needs magnesium, and so forth. Yeah, I love that you shared that with us. And individuals are probably like mind blown, like, oh my gosh, I need to pause, I need to write down, I need to like, oh my, we're going too fast, Sheradyn.
I know.
No, I love it. No, me too. I love it. And I love that we're sharing this information, all this information with individuals, and they're able to re-listen to it again or ask us any questions that they may have. Let's go back to gut microbe, right? So what role, at the start you said, you know, we live in apartments, we're clean and things like that, sterile, and that you do some testing and so forth. What role does the gut microbe have in IBS?
Yeah, so when we're thinking about the gut microbiome, you're thinking there's trillions of bacteria, yeast, fungi living in your gut. So I like to explain it to people. Essentially, you've got a garden in there, right? And you need adequate flowers, good things, little amounts of the weeds. Like, we don't want them thriving. Now, think of modern generation. We're taking a lot of birth control pill, antibiotics, reflux medication, Panadol, ibuprofen, all this stuff, which impacts our gut microbiome. So we start to slowly damage our good gut flora, which allow these opportunistic bacteria to grow. So two of your really beneficial bacteria that most people will know is lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. If you walk into Coles and you pick up yogurt and you have a look on the back, it'll have those two bacteria in it. If you walk into the chemist and buy your stock standard Inner Health Plus probiotic, it'll probably have those two bacteria on it because they're highly researched, they're highly beneficial, and they promote a lot of healing in your gut microbiome. They support digestion, they produce B vitamins, they help with mood. We know that 95% of our serotonin is produced in our gut. There's a real link between our brain-gut axis. What they also do is they help decrease inflammation. So we actually help prevent a healthy gut lining. So where the cells in the gut should be shoulder to shoulder, nicely tightly coated with a bit of mucus on top, which helps protect the cells from food particles hitting it. Underneath the food cells is our bloodstream, and we should be able to digest that food, pull those nutrients into your bloodstream, diverse through your body, you feel great. Now, in a classic IBS or someone who's got bloating, constipation, loose stools, what's happening is we've damaged that good gut flora somehow. So food poisoning, indigestion of really inflammatory microbes, a lot of antibiotics, you've got yeast, you've got thrush, so you're thinking a damaged vaginal microbiome as well. So we've got this low picture of good gut flora, which is when what we call our opportunistic or bad bacteria, they start to overgrow. Exactly like a garden, you wipe out all the flowers, the weeds will easily just take over. Now, what happens with those bacteria is you sort of got two subcategories. You've got like dysbiotics, so they're disease-forming bacteria, so they let off a lot of LPS, so a lot of toxins into the body, and that causes our autoimmunity, that causes systemic inflammation, all those kinds of things. And then you've sort of just got what we call sort of unwanted bacteria. So they're not disease-forming, but they're not beneficial. So we have these, and these bacteria, they can often cause that bloating because they're fermenting the food but not breaking it down properly. That causes gas. That causes you bloating, that causes constipation. So it's just the way the food passes through and where it's getting broken down. Now, if those bacteria are all up in your small intestine, which is a reasonably, almost, I want to say sterile, but it's not sterile, but it's not where the fermentation is supposed to occur. It's supposed to occur in the large intestine, which should be riddled with beneficial bacteria to be able to break it down, produce short-chain fatty acids, which feed your colon cells. So fermentation's occurring where it shouldn't be occurring. That's giving you digestive symptoms. Primarily bloating, like after eating, you'll notice it. Waking up bloated throughout the day, bloating to high FODMAP foods. They're kind of your big ones. And then gassiness, constipation, loose stools.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that information with us. You definitely went in deep in regards to the gut, the gut microbiome and which ones we're supposed to have, what the potential symptoms are, and so forth. And this is why I think you, Sheridan, tell everyone it's key to test, right? So, do you have that bacteria that's supposed to be in your large intestine, in your small intestine, or do you have that bacteria somewhere else, or not enough of the good one to protect it? And I love your explanation about how nutrients supposed to go in the bloodstream, and if we damage that barrier, it's just going to cause havoc in our body, and we don't realize that. And it takes a while to repair that. And then just because we've removed that bacteria out of our body doesn't mean that that's it, that's done. And that goes back to the point what you said earlier about individuals taking antimicrobials and then that's it. There's a whole process that individuals have to go through to ensure that that gut is healed after it, right? And then you're able to take in the nutrients and benefit from it. So then you're able to make the stomach acid and so forth. You mentioned FODMAPs, right? And a lot of people who have IBS, have been diagnosed with IBS or heard of it, have heard FODMAPs. And earlier you said FODMAPs is good for a short period of time, not for a long period of time. What are your thoughts on these elemental, diets where you remove things, where you remove certain foods for a period or for a long period of time? Because individuals remove them and they go, I feel amazing. Why would I put them back into my body? Right? You're laughing.
Yeah.
So tell us.
Yeah, I laugh because I see it so often and it makes sense. Like, I'm like, yeah, I was the same for so many years. I'm like, why would I eat garlic and onion and legumes? Because I feel like crap on it. And it's just, part of the whole process. But I'm also like, that's like going to the gym and only ever using 2 kilos and never increasing in weight, because it's like, why would I do that? That's hard. Well,
You're supposed to increase your weight?
What game changer? Take home message, guys. But it's that same thing. It's like, well, yeah, do you want to be stuck where you are, or do you want to grow and get better and fitter and stronger and improve your longevity and your health? So it's the same process. It's like, well, you want to be able to pull these foods back into your diet, but the key, like the most important thing, if you only remember anything from this whole podcast episode, is that those foods are food for your good gut flora. So you actually need to feed your microbiome. You can't just take probiotics and expect to fix it, because probiotics are transitional. So they just move through calming inflammation, helping motility, doing their beneficial thing, but they don't stick around. So we actually need to calm the inflammation, but then add in prebiotic rich foods or supplements, which are going to help that microbiome regrow. And this is really, really hard. It is, for me as a clinician, as a practitioner, it is so much easier if you walk into my clinic, do a stool test, and have a hugely overgrown microbiome, and we can just smash it with herbs to pull it all back, than it is if you walk in and you've got a really undergrown bacteria picture. So to rebuild and restore that is such a slow process, because you're going to get bloated, you're going to get gas, and you're going to get uncomfortable, because growth is uncomfortable. And that's the same as going into the gym. You wouldn't walk in and pick up a 120 kilo deadlift if you've never deadlift before, right? Because you're going to hurt yourself, and that would be me seeing your microbiome test and going, okay, now go eat garlic, onions, chili con carne, and good luck to you, because that is like the most fiber rich, dense meal, and your gut will freak out. So slowly adding in prebiotics. One that's really, really well tolerated is called PHGG, so partially hydrolyzed guar gum. It's one that I start nearly all my clients on, no matter what their digestive symptoms, because the research is amazing. You start really slow, quarter, half a teaspoon, slowly increase over the weeks, and it's really well tolerated, and it feeds that bifidobacteria quite well, okay? So stuff like that is beneficial, because the high prebiotic rich foods are high FODMAP foods. So brassicas, broccoli, for example, garlics, onions, legumes, those things are really high in prebiotic fibers, but they're really hard to digest. So you've got to just go really slowly with them. But that's where a supplement can kind of step in and help. But then the third element to that is probiotic it, prebiotic it, and then polyphenols. Polyphenols are antioxidants which just help reduce that inflammation and help repair that gut lining. So that's really color dense foods like berries, dark cacao powder. Look for purple carrots, look for your black rice, your coloured quinoa. So these colours, like our red wine we always talk about, and our dark chocolate, high in antioxidants, go for it, people. So these are the foods that are also really going to help promote healing in a different mechanism than your prebiotic rich foods are.
Yeah, that's amazing that you shared that with us. And I think mentally it'll be hard for individuals to, now that if an individual has gone off FODMAPs for, let's say, 6 months to a year, I think mentally it'll be hard for them to kind of overcome and go, what, this is beneficial for me, I need to include it in our diet, because they've seen it as the bad guy or girl or thing for such a long period of time. I think it's a whole mental thing individuals have to overcome, and it's a change of lifestyle, because it's like when you go shopping, it's like, oh, stay away from the beans, stay away from the broccoli, the cauliflower, and now it's like, I need that. It's a whole mental game changer, isn't it?
Yeah, 110%. And lactose and dairy is the same thing, like people get off or head towards more of a vegan style diet because they feel better because they're not digesting the lactose very well. And like 99% of the time, it's not a dairy allergy. It's actually just low digestive enzymes in the body from low minerals that we've talked about before. And then so reintroducing that stuff, sometimes people need to start at like 1 tablespoon of milk per day. Like it's a really small amount to build it back up. And same with legumes, like you start with sprouted, well cooked or tinned legumes, which have lower FODMAP content, or like gluten's the same. Most women, when I start working with them at the start of my 6-month program, they cannot handle gluten. By the end of it, they can tolerate it 1 to 2 a week of good quality sources, like a good quality sourdough, and they're sort of increasing their tolerance from there, because one, they've done the rebuild and the repair work, and when you've done that, your capacity for food increases a lot. Like I have women eating garlic and onion who previously were like, I'd be running to the toilet, severe cramp, stomach pain, and now they're going, I can tolerate that when we go out for Chinese or whatever it is.
Wow.
So it's just rebuilding, repairing, and then slowly at your own pace reintroducing those foods.
Yeah. I think I just got an image after, so when the people start your program and after the program at the 6 months, I don't have to get a certificate or not. When they get the certificate, they have an onion and they're biting into it. Like, I can do this now,
Yeah, what? Eating a raw onion would not be on the top of my list. Maybe it's have a ice cream or a donut.
I love it.
Raw garlic cloves.
Yeah, there you go. I've done it.
Oh, yeah, raw garlic cloves. I did when I was going through my parasite stuff at the start, and I was bouncing through all these really crap practitioners, and one was like, just a lot of garlic cloves, and I had like severe SIBO, which I didn't know at the time, so I was eating 3 or 4 garlic cloves a day. It was just like, and diatomaceous earth, like a binder. It was just disgust. Like, it's so bad to do it like that much, and people are like, it'll work, or
that's crazy. So let's go back now to the functional testing that we spoke about at the start that we got everyone excited about, right? So do you prefer, if individuals come to you and say, I want to get a test done straight away, do you prefer to see the insides of their guts straight away? Or what do you do? Like, what tests are mandatory, do you think, to run if you've been diagnosed with SIBO?
Yeah, so most women I see haven't done any testing, so they start my program working with me and I kind of assess where they're at. Like if they've got any severe hormonal stuff like PCOS or endo or thyroid things, Hashimoto's, any autoimmune condition, regardless of whether they've got gut symptoms or not, I always push for a gut test, not necessarily a SIBO breath test, but always a stool test. If they've got any digestive, bloating, reflux, heartburn, because the thing is, like, heartburn and reflux go away in nearly all my SIBO clients as soon as we start treating it, and people are like, oh, this is crazy. I'm like, yeah, it's one of those symptoms that will disappear immediately. It's bizarre, but that's the way it works. But SIBO is kind of the optional one based on sort of your background and where I think it started, but a stool test is like I would say 99% of my clients do a stool test, unless they've done some gut work previously and now they're coming to me for, kind of maybe PCOS, missing periods, under eating, stress-based stuff. Then I'll go, let's run a Dutch comprehensive hormone test. But I just like to drill into people that there's a pyramid with your health and gut health is at the bottom. Sex hormones, adrenal, thyroid are all further up the chain. If you're not dealing with this foundation, there is no way you can fix your thyroid health. There's no way you can fix your adrenal health or your hormones without making sure you can absorb and digest those key nutrients.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more with you. So the stool test, like you said, is totally different to the one that's run at your GPs or doctors. It gives you a lot more information. What type of information would people look at getting?
Yeah, so with this one, it covers probably about 10 different parasites. It covers 20 plus different opportunistic bacteria. It covers, it's like 30 different beneficial bacteria. It covers your autoimmune markers, your inflammatory markers, your beta-glucuronidase, which is an enzyme that helps bind up extra estrogen, because a lot of women have tender breasts, painful periods, mood swings, and a lot of that's coming from poor gut health. Because even like one client yesterday was like, I had my first pain-free period ever, and all we've done is gut work. We haven't even touched her hormones yet. So, having those regular bowel movements is really critical. What else do we look at? Leaky gut markers. And then, just that ratio of beneficial to bad bacteria. And then also your things like your viruses, but those nasty bacteria like salmonella and stuff as well. So it's got a real broad spectrum of things that we're covering.
Yeah, and all the things that you see on that test, you're able to deal with. Like, it's not like we see something and we go, oh, can't deal with it. So you have the kind of like the answer or a protocol for most of those.
Yep, except if it's elevated, there's something called calprotectin, lysozyme. If those two are elevated, as well as what is the other one, SIG-IgA, which is your immune marker, if those three are elevated and there's blood in your stools, because I'm looking for blood as well, then I will work with you, but I will refer you on to gastroenterologist GP as well, because then there is potential for IBD, which is they've got to do colonoscopy, endoscopy, diagnose kind of that route as to what you've got, or worst case scenario, I'd barely say it to people, but potential cancer or polyps or something else going on that's out of my scope, then we work with them. In saying that, I've had some heartbreaking cases where I've pulled up a GI map and I've gone, there's inflammation here. She's got a couple autoimmune conditions. Go see a gastroenterologist. She paid $300 to see them. They looked at the test and went, oh no, there's nothing we need to do here. She had inflammation, blood in her stools, autoimmune conditions. She's a high risk for irritable bowel disease, and they wouldn't even look at it in that scenario. Like, there's just cases where I just go, are you actually kidding me? Like, I'm trying to do my duty of care. Please respect it and do yours as well. Like, it's really heartbreaking sometimes.
Yeah, and it's good to know that that test that you said can potentially lead to, something bigger diagnosis that may have been missed, but you just been diagnosed with IBS. And that's the whole thing that we spoke about, why IBS is a BS diagnosis. And this, just doing this test or just looking into it more from someone else's lens, you're able to get more detail and hopefully get an answer of what's happening.
Yeah, 110%. And I think for most people, like, they're not running these tests because they're thinking that they've got IBD. But if they do have IBD, do run these tests, because then we can look at reasons for it as well, like these inflammatory bacteria, rebalancing the microbiome, and then also supporting those really high inflammation levels, and your fish oils, your bone broths, your collagen, your glutamine, all that sort of prebiotics, rebuilding up a real healthy mucosa is going to actually prevent a lot of that leaky gut, which can lead to leaky skin, which can lead to thyroid conditions and everything else as well.
Yeah, the list just goes on and on and on. And earlier you did even mention the vaginal microbiome also. This can just go on and on.
We could go down a rabbit hole on thrush and the vaginal microbiome, because it's one of my pet peeves is women just going, I'm just treating thrush and treating thrush and treating thrush. And like, yeah, that's all well and good to do that every month, but what about long term? And A, is it even thrush or is it BV? Like, is it bacterial vaginosis? Because so often they're misdiagnosed. And two, what are you doing about it? Are you, beyond just popping a probiotic here and there, like how are you restoring the root cause of your thrush? Like it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Or UTIs or all that stuff comes back to the gut microbiome.
100%. I couldn't agree more with you. And the thing is, some individuals don't know different, so they do stuff to help their thrush, and that actually damages their gut even more. And they're stuck in this circle. And look, girl, it's time to get out of that circle. It's time to get out of that circle and seek some help, because there's individuals like myself, there's individuals like Sheradyn, there's individuals like other individuals out there who have the knowledge, even like Sheradyn, who has the experience, that are able to assist you with whatever it is that you're going through. So Sheradyn, give me 3 practical tips, or give me something individuals can start right now if they've been diagnosed with IBS.
Yeah, if your GP said that you've had IBS, I would, if you can, I would go get some testing done and just figure out what's the root cause and the driver of that IBS. So starting down that pathway of reaching out to a functional practitioner or a naturopath that you know does the testing, that would be my biggest recommendation. If that's not within your budget, within your ballpark right now, I would download the Monash University app and have a look at the FODMAP diet. But just bear in mind, it's not a root cause approach. So have a look at it, use their AMBER, their traffic light system, to work out what foods you're reacting to, then use their reintroduction guide to slowly add those foods back in, because you're not going to react to every single high FODMAP food. You're going to react to a certain group. It might be fructans, it might be lactase, it might be whatever it is. So figure out what your triggers are. And then also, again, save up for the testing while you're doing that, but do that and sort of start to reintroduce things. Add in a prebiotic fiber, which is tolerated in SIBO. So add in PHGG, work on your FODMAPs, get your testing. I would be very careful with probiotics, because I'm just going to say a lot of people with SIBO are sensitive to probiotics. So add in a spore-based probiotic, which is generally the best tolerated because it's not bacteria. So Megaspore by Microbiome Labs is one of my favorite sort of general probiotic in a sense to add in. Otherwise, if it's severe loose stools, Saccharomyces boulardii, which you can just buy from a chemist, SB it's usually called, or SB Pro, or Flora Active by Bioceuticals, is a really good one to add in, because you're not changing bacteria as such, because it's not a bacteria, but you're starting to change the pH and the environment that good bacteria can grow in, which is just going to be more beneficial.
Yeah, wow, you just shared some absolute gems with us right there. I am going to follow up with what we spoke about at the start. I mean, we have to give the answers to people that were listening about Bali Belly. What would be like one thing, if you could be like, you need to take this with you to Bali, what would it be? This is not advice. This is not advice. Yeah. This is not advice. This is talk to your healthcare professional. But What would it be?
It'd be 2 things. It would be the SB Pro, so the Flora Active or the Saccharomyces boulardii, 100%, 2 a.m., 2 p.m. Do it 2 weeks leading up to you going, and do it while you're there, and do it for a couple of weeks when you come home. Just going to increase the SIG IgA in your gut, increase your immune response, and help push out any parasites or pathogens. Secondly, if you do get sick, make sure you've got activated charcoal with you, or you can genuinely buy it over there, because I have bought it over there before, and just take like usually 2 capsules an hour after food or away from supplements, in the morning, in the afternoon, because it's just the best binder at binding crap out of the body. Like those 2 would be my, sort of, if I was going, that's what I would do. I've got a whole podcast episode on that, because I just find so many people like, what am I taking? And I'm like, this is what you need to do.
I love that. And where can we find your podcast?
It's called the Empowered Hormones Podcast with Sheradyn Dekker.
I love that. I'm going to link that podcast episode down in the show notes, because I think it's so important. Absolutely important, because look, at the end of the day, if you do come back after Bali and you have issues, you have this hope. There's always hope out there, but it's always good to be proactive than coming back and just wrecking your holiday. I mean, you want to enjoy it, and I know so many people out there at the moment, and those 2 things are definitely on the list that I've recommended 100%.
Good, good, love it. You're all over it. Perfect.
I love it. I love it. Look, Sheridan, as this is the Natural Health Podcast and we've kind of come to the end of it, what is your best kept natural health hack? What's something that you may do every day, once a year, that really keeps you healthy?
People are probably not going to love me for this, but it is beef liver. Honestly, if I'm traveling, I always take beef liver supplements, so dried beef liver with me, the capsules, and I'll have those capsules on a daily basis. If I'm at home, then I do one of two things. I either get my beef liver, I cut it up in tiny little domino-sized bits, and I chuck it in the freezer, and then I just pull out one bit each day and either fry it up, or some people chop it up and just swallow it raw, but I'm not a raw fan of beef liver. I was just like, but I'll cook it up, or I will chuck it in my food processor with some mince, and I'll make meatballs, and I'll do like 500 grams of mince to 100 grams of liver, so I know I'm getting 100 grams of liver over the week. I just know it's so nutrient dense. It's the most underrated, cheapest thing you can get. It's like $8 a kilo. So even if you I chop out all the sinewy crap bits which freak me out, and I just pull the good bits out of it. But I just feel like it's so underrated how nutrient dense food is. So for me, that's kind of a non-negotiable. And if you're vegan or you don't want to be having animal products, I would at least try to tolerate the supplement, because if you look at the iron and the zinc and the copper and things in it and you compare it to a lot of your other foods, like chuck it in Chronometer or MyFitnessPal and look at the nutrients in it, the Bs, you'll be like, oh wow, if I could include one thing for the rest of my life, it's got to be a good quality beef liver, I would say.
I love that health hack. Thank you for sharing that with us, Sheridan. Is there anything you want to share, anything else before we close the podcast for today?
Not really. I would just love to connect with any of you guys. If you, want to listen to the Empowered Hormones podcast, or send me a DM on Instagram. So Sheradyn_functional nutrition. I love hearing from you. Or you can jump in my free Facebook group, Gut Health Solutions. And I'm always putting like tips and tricks and enemas and beef liver and random stuff in there. So if you like to learn about all that random stuff, please join along for the journey. But other than that, it's just been a pleasure to be here.
Oh, wonderful. And I'll put all that in the show notes also. I love the information that you shared about IBS with us today, how it is a BS diagnosis and what you can do. And there is hope out there for you to get yourself in contact with a practitioner like Sheradyn, who's able to assist you with your gut health and essentially lead you to optimal health. Thank you so much for joining us on Natural Podcast. And remember, you are pure love, capable of living life to your fullest potential. Content and information provided here is the opinion of Mahela Raguse and is for information purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. It is not intended to provide medical advice or take the place of medical advice or any current treatment you're undertaking. Consult your own medical professionals for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast. It is advised that you consult your doctor or healthcare professional in relation to any health concerns you may be having. Mahela Raguse does not take responsibility for any health consequences which occur from a person listening, viewing, or reading this content. And in no circumstances shall the Natural Health Podcast, Mahela Raguse, any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast, or any employees, associates, or affiliates of Mahela Raguse be responsible for damages arising from the information provided on the Natural Health Podcast. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical conditions in either yourself or others. Please note, if you're taking prescription, do not stop your medication or start a new protocol, including but not limited to supplements, diet, lifestyle changes without consulting a doctor or healthcare professional. If you or any person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical advice. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have read or heard on the Natural Health Podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. Neither Mahela Raguse nor the publisher of this content takes responsibility for the possible health consequences of any person or persons reading or listening or following the information in the educational content.